I'm Roxanne Stafford. I'm going to give them all my details.
Whatever you want.
It
doesn't
matter.
matter.
I am a survivor of Ewing sarcoma. It's a form of bone cancer. I was diagnosed as a teenager. It's very similar to osteocarcinoma, who the Kennedy Jr. had, so a lot of people are familiar with it through that. At the time I was diagnosed, there were 36 cases in the United States, and there was a 98% mortality rate. There were new drugs that came on the market. I was treated at UCSF, and that new drug at the time was called vincristine and Cytoxan. They're now very common drugs that are used in chemotherapy cocktails. Well, one of their, the Cytoxan, your body immediately flushes it out, right? It just wants it to get out. It would feel like my blood was literally being drained from my body, like the medicine was pushing the life out of me. I would go cold. They put a blood pressure cup around my head at 120 for 5 minutes. With some people they would put ice, but with me they'd put this blood pressure cup, and then I would be hooked up to an IV drip to keep me hydrated. And as soon as that Cytoxan hit my body, I would begin vomiting. And I would vomit until the third day, when there was nothing left but bile. And I would retch. During part of this time, for a 3-month period, I was in a body cast and nauseous, and having and my mother, very simple woman, very beloved woman, a woman of just great. I wouldn't say sinfulness, the unsinfulness. She was just full of grace and piety, and all she could do, sinlessness.
There you go.
That's the word. All she could do was to sit by my bedside and hold a bowl and make sure that I didn't choke on my vomit, especially when I was in my body cast. And we were very poor. We lived in it doesn't exist anymore. It was a one-room shack in San Francisco, on the other side of Geneva and Mission. And on top of everything else, my dad was an alcoholic, and she'd gone through a bad beating, and we had to leave. And my uncle knew these people that had this shed, so it was a sunroom. It was a growing room. And I had a hospital bed in this growing room, and she would come in, she would hold the bowl for me. So here she is, this woman in this really just very dire circumstances, and she stayed strong. And with her, I now realize that when somebody else suffers with you, it really takes, it ameliorates the suffering somehow. And but now as a mother, I look back and think, wow, of course I would do that for my daughter, but I always thought of what I was going through as the worst thing, but I would rather go through that again than to be a parent of a child going through that. And as I got older, and my pain from my multiple femur fractures, pelvic fracture, patella fractures, I have no knee, was removed. I have no patella tendon. I have intramedullary rod, a titanium rod. It's the third one, and that's why I'm able to walk somewhat. But human spirit's very adaptable. I was doing really well with my life.
You had me fooled when I first met you. I says, "What's wrong with your foot?"
Right. And but the pain was really getting to me, and it was interfering with my ability to think. And I was raising children, and I was working full time as an attorney. So I needed to be able to sleep at night, and I could not take pills. I don't like pills. I've taken more drugs than probably, I'd say 99% of people, because of all my surgeries. They used to begin with we used to get morphine injections, right? And I'd have knots all over from the morphine injections. Then it became Demerol, then it became Versed, and Darvocets, all of, but I made me crap like a rabbit, and made me nauseous. And if there's one thing I can't stand from throwing up for 3 years, it's nauseousness. So I smoked a joint. And I was the good girl. I went to UC Hastings College of Law. I was a lawyer at 24 years old. You don't become. I went to Amherst, in that's where I have my Bachelor of Arts in English. So I was the good kid, you know, who had the cancer. But now I was really suffering, and that night changed everything for me because I was.
How old were you when you tried this?
About 42.
Wow.
I was able to collect my thoughts in the morning. I wasn't in pain anymore. And then I started thinking about those years when I was on chemotherapy, and the idea that the misery, the anguish, the agony of my mother and of myself could have been lessened, diminished, let's say by a day.
Even by a little bit.
By a day. That at 16 I would have had that extra day, right? And that my mother would have had that extra day to share with me, and that the closed-mindedness and that the stigma associated with it, that I could lose my license to practice in federal court because I choose not to take pills.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with that.
Something's wrong. Maybe we should do something about it. Well, we welcome you to our family, and very glad to have you with us. And, you know, sometimes the sufferings and all the hardships bring us to a point maybe we would have never met had all these things not happened. So thank you, Roxanne.